hard to blanket statement this question into go take this science course or this undergrad science course, because I really don't highly recommend retaking undergrad sciences unless you, again, have been told to retake it because you got a C or less in it. And then keep in mind, some schools, if you got a less than a C or a C or less, they may not care about retaking courses. So it does not matter if you retake it, because if that's the one school that you think you want to apply to and they don't consider retaking courses, the answer is you shouldn't apply there, period, because you're not going to qualify for their applicant pool. And that's a hard reality to face, but it's the reality. If some programs don't consider retaking courses, meaning they take your first grade, and if it's a D, you live with that D forevermore, and they don't ever consider a retaking course into your overall GPA, which means you more than likely will not ever get an interview at that. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Fennell. And in today's shorty episode, we're going to answer some questions that were left on my social media. So if you do follow me on social media, whether that's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, I highly encourage you to leave some comments in some of the posts, ask questions, because I'm going to start incorporating this into the show a little more frequently to make sure that you are getting recognized. And I appreciate you so very much. And if you're not familiar with what my social handles are, it's always at CRNA School Prep Academy. So if you just Google CRNA School Prep Academy YouTube, CRNA School Prep Academy Instagram, TikTok, you will find us. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started into the questions. So the first question is, I'm not able to work in the ICU yet since science classes are really old. What can I do now for my application other than retaking my science classes? Thank you. So if you are currently still in nursing school or getting your nursing degree and you're not able to currently work in the ICU, so you feel like you kind of just are kind of stuck in this stagnant limbo land where you want to do something, you want to work towards something that's going to benefit you down the road as you embark on your CRNA journey, other than just retaking old science courses, here are some other suggestions that you can be doing. So one of them that I often say that is a great starting point for anyone pursuing this career path is job shadowing. So I do think job shadowing should be done early and often, because as I spoke to in the past, it shows persistence over time. It shows interest over time. So even if you're very early on, even if you're still getting your nursing degree, starting to try to job shadow is a really great way to get exposure to this career path, have a better understanding of this career path, and also documenting your experiences over time to allow yourself to see your own growth in the process and what you've learned. And also kind of see what interests you. And so that way, when you do get to your interview day and your application and you write your personal statement, you can really speak truly to this profession and passionately about this profession because you've had a lot of exposure to it. So again, job shadowing is a great additional thing that you can start doing to really beef up your application. Just make sure that you are documenting your experience. We have a free shadow documentation form that, again, I can make sure is listed in the show notes below. You can also find it on my link tree on Instagram and things of that nature. But you can also just document it on a piece of paper. You don't have to make it fancy. A lot of schools have their own shadow form. So I do encourage you to check there first to see if your future CRNA program has their own shadow documentation form. But document your experience. I think it's a great way to, again, kind of tracking your progress. And you can always submit it with your application in the future as additional documentation, which again will show persistence over time in your pursuit of becoming a CRNA. What else can you do other than retaking your old science classes? So additional things that you could do, and again, this will depend on where you're at in your schooling, but I just know it was possible for me, so I want to make sure I highlight this again, that it is potentially a possibility for you, is depending on where you're at. Again, maybe you're in your senior year in nursing school, for example, and you're retaking some old sciences. The other opportunity that you may be able to do is you may be able to petition to be able to take a graduate level course in your undergrad. Maybe you have time, maybe you have some space and some space in your schedule. Maybe you're not taking a full course load or something like that, but you can take a graduate level stats course and get that out of the way because it's required for your graduate program. I was a senior nursing student at the time that I did this, and I was able to have a petition filled out where I would actually get graduate level credit as an undergrad student for taking a graduate level course. Now, not all schools are going to allow this, but the fact that I know it's a possibility, it could also be a possibility for you. So it's something to consider, again, if you have this room in your schedule. Speaking for myself, for example, I was a fifth year senior. So I had a lot of space in my schedule because I got rejected from the College of Nursing my first attempt. And so my fifth year in school, I didn't have a lot to do other than my nursing courses. And so I had the space. And so that's why I wanted to make use of my time. And I went ahead and took that graduate level statistics course, but I had to make sure that it actually would count as graduate level credit, even though I was technically still in my undergrad degree. So that's something else to keep in mind. Other things that you could do if you have the time and space while you're not working in the ICU yet is just start mapping out different volunteer activities that you're really passionate about, that you want to get involved in. Maybe that's some type of volunteer work, or maybe it's some kind of community or club, or something, again, that really lights you up, that you feel like you can do consistently over the years, that you can add to your application and your resume down the road. This could be joining, student nurse associations and getting actively involved in those associations and finding committee work to do. You can start trying to find maybe some research opportunities as even a nursing student, to just do maybe a literature review for some physicians that you're in clinical with. You never know until you ask. And even though you might think, I'm just a nursing student, who am I? You never know until you ask. And most people are not going to turn down free help. So if you're willing to offer your services for free, meaning my time to do a literature review on whatever graduate level project one of your clinical coordinators is working on for their DNP project or their master's degree or whatever it is, you can be a part of that. You can just help them, and they may include you on their publication. That would be another great way to, again, start thinking of these early application boosters. So those are just some ideas that came to mind as far as different things you can do other than retaking undergrad science courses. Now, of course, I'm grateful that you recognize your science courses are older and you will need to retake them. I do think it's important, before you go sign up to retake all your undergrad sciences, though, I want to make sure that you guys are connecting with your future CRNA programs to make sure you know which courses are necessary versus just making assumptions, because I'd hate for you to spend precious time and money retaking something that isn't necessary. Like, for example, maybe you had an undergrad science course of like an intro to chemistry and something like that. And so maybe you're thinking, well, I'll retake my intro to chemistry because it's over 10 years old. But maybe your CRNA program would prefer you to have Gen Chem 1 and 2, and that was not required of you over 10 years ago for your first part of your degree. And so you just retook an undergrad course that's not going to do you any good, and you still have to take Gen 1 or Chem 1 and Chem 2 or Chem 1 and OChem. So you'd be better off finding out these little nuances before you just rinse and repeat what you've already done, to make sure if there's some kind of variance in what you have already received, to make sure you're tailoring your science courses to what they're actually looking for. So just want to make sure I point that out as well before we move on to question number 2. All right, next question. Do you have any recommendations on online options for retaking undergraduate science courses? Oh man, this seems, I haven't even pre-read these questions before I started recording this podcast, but it's kind of funny because it's over a similar topic. So we have compiled a list. It's hard for me to just give blanket recommendations because there are so many variations out there. So I don't feel comfortable giving you a blanket statement. However, again, we inside the Academy have an ongoing Excel list, PDF list, whatever you want to call it, of what other students have used and what courses they have used these colleges for. Like I know MTSA, for example, I'm pretty sure has a really popular advanced pathophysiology course. But, there's so many, like, some people need a really specific math course, for example, math something or another, but it's like a pre-calc kind of math. Like they need a really specific math course to apply to CRNA school, that type of thing. So I think before you start looking into taking undergraduate science courses, because remember guys, undergraduate science courses are not really what moves the needle. It's graduate level science courses. I'm going to say that again. Undergraduate sciences do not move the needle the way graduate level science courses will move the needle for you in your GPA score. The reason is because the rigor of the program. You're going into a graduate level program, a graduate level science-based program with a very high rigor to the courses. So if you don't have any graduate level science courses and all you have is undergrad science courses, especially ones that you maybe didn't do so well in, they're going to really question your ability to be able to keep up with the rigor of a graduate level science curriculum. So that is why they place heavier weight and also calculates into your GPA heavier because it's weighted heavier. It's worth more credit hours, but the graduate level sciences will give you more bang for your buck. So do not just go repeat undergrad sciences, please, unless you have to, unless you received a C or less, or you were told to do it, or they're over 10 years old. Those are the reasons why it makes sense to retake undergraduate level. But remember, like I said in the previous question, make sure you're not just rinsing and repeating an old course that they don't even care about. Make sure you're taking a course that's undergrad level science that they actually want to see you have taken, like a Gen Chemistry 1 and OChem versus just an Intro to Chem, because some colleges don't even count Intro to Chem as a chemistry course, by the way, which is kind of like, what? People are like, oh my gosh, that's all my nursing college needed. And unfortunately, they end up having to retake these undergrad courses that they never, ever had to take, never knew they had to take because it was not required for their nursing degree. So they assume when they apply to grad school that their requirements are met because they got the nursing degree. It's not always the case. And so this is also, I should have preferenced with what else can you do prior to working in the ICU as far as boosting your application. You guys go to open houses. Like, this is your free ticket to just talk and get direct advice from the program faculty themselves, which is also why I encourage you to come to our future CRNA conference coming up on July 15th and 16th. If you have not bought your ticket, I highly encourage you to do so. We will have 23 CRNA programs in attendance at our virtual conference, and it's virtual, so no cost of travel. You can be in your pajamas. I know everyone's burnt out on virtual, but it is so easy. The barrier to entry is low, and it's very cost effective. And because it's cost effective and the barrier to entry is low, we have 23 schools participating. That would never happen in person. We would never be able to coordinate 23 programs to drop everything, fly across the country, and come to an in-person conference. So this is a great opportunity for you to hear from a variety of program faculty to get these questions answered. Like, this would be a great question to ask 10 schools at the conference next month, because you will hear a variety of answers and it will give you a lot of great insight on, oh, I didn't even think of that, or oh, that's a good point, or oh my gosh, I never thought that I would have to do that. And so these are the types of questions that you should be bringing to a conference like this, to hear directly from program faculty, and not just one program. Ask them all. Go into all their private Zoom rooms. They all have separate private Zoom rooms that you can go face to face and be on a Zoom call, like just like this, and see them directly face to face and ask questions. Or go in there and be a fly on the wall and spy on other people and what they're asking and take notes, because I guarantee you're going to get so many gold nuggets out of it. But that being said, again, it's hard to blanket statement this question into go take this science course or this undergrad science course, because I really don't highly recommend retaking undergrad sciences unless you, again, have been told to retake it because you got a C or less in it. And then keep in mind, some schools, if you got a less than a C or a C or less, they may not care about retaking courses. So it does not matter if you retake it, because if that's the one school that you think you want to apply to and they don't consider retaking courses, the answer is you shouldn't apply there, period, because you're not going to qualify for as their applicant pool. And that's a hard reality to face, but it's the reality. If some programs don't consider retaking courses, meaning they take your first grade, and if it's a D, you live with that D forevermore, and they don't ever consider a retaking course into your overall GPA, which means you more than likely will not ever get an interview at that school. And I know that sounds really harsh, and that's only, I would say that's the minority of schools kind of have that rule. But some schools do. Other schools will omit the lower grade and take the higher grade into your GPA, while other schools will average the two. And so those are three different ways that schools can look at your undergrad transcripts, meaning they don't even count retaking courses. So what's set in stone is set in stone, kind of thing. You wrote on your own tombstone and you can never erase it, kind of thing. Then there's some schools who, again, will average the two grades. If you got a D and an A, they'll, average those two grades to take the middle ground. Then the other option that schools can do is you got a D and you got an A, they'll take the A and omit the D, which is very generous. And so again, if that's what your history is like, I would sniff out those types of schools, because you're more likely to get an interview at those types of schools than the ones who either don't count or don't consider retakes or average the retakes. So these are the little nuances that's like so vital to find out before you even consider applying to a school, because you really want to assess where you would stand as far as a competitive nature in the applicant pool. You guys, it's competitive. There was a CRNA program that I talked to the program director, 450 applicants. What? 450 applicants for 34 seats. Yeah, that's recent. And I'm hearing similar things from program directors all across the country. Back when the pandemic hit, I had no idea. I actually predicted the wrong prediction. I predicted they would get less applicants to CRNA school because everyone's going to be preoccupied and like just in survival mode. I actually thought they were going to see a big dip in CRNA applicants, but just the opposite occurred. And it's been just the opposite ever since. Like, they saw record numbers of applicants, and they've consistently over the last 2 to 3 years have seen record numbers of applicants going back for CRNA. And a lot of it, I think now that I understand the situation better, and I think we're all kind of coming out of the fog of what we went through, but it's because everyone's burnt out. And I think, as an ICU nurse, they're like, what else is there for me? And this cannot be it. And so CRNA is the option for a lot of ICU nurses. And so it's incredibly competitive. And I'm not trying to say that to unencourage you. I'm just trying to paint a realistic picture to know that picking your school is so important, and understanding what's in your background and what you're going to be up against to make sure that you can make good choices going forward so you can increase your odds the greatest.
Hey, future CRNA, another daily dose of inspiration along your CRNA journey. This success story starts with these words. With all the happiness in the world, I am so excited to say I was accepted into CRNA school, into my top choice school. My journey has been a roller coaster, to say the least. I'm so blessed for this amazing opportunity. Thank you, CRNA School Prep Academy, for all your amazing resources. Your support resources have helped me during every step of this process. I wish everyone on their journey all the strength and positivity. I say with the utmost certainty that if you want it, you will get there. If you envision it, you will have it. I'm going to be a CRNA, you guys. I can't stop crying. So I wanted to share this because some really inspirational words and motivation from the student is that if you envision it, you will become it. If you believe, you will achieve. And while I know some of you may be full of fear and doubt, this is the transition that needs to occur in your CRNA journey. Really, we're unstoppable as human beings. If we really want something, we will go after it at no avail, right? So I hope that leaves you with this positive reinforcement that you are doing your best. And as long as you keep showing up, you're going to find success. So no matter what experiences you think may hold you back, just embrace it, face it head on. You can do this. I'm rooting for you. Let's get back to the show.
Okay, that was totally a tangent, and I'm sorry about that. But that was my tangent, is about undergrad sciences and just understanding what your school will do if you retake a science course, and knowing where you would then fall with your GPA and things of that nature. So that was probably, I don't know if that was the answer this person's looking for, but that was quite a mouthful. But yeah, I don't know if I recommend any specific undergrad science courses other than trying to figure out why you think you need to retake them first. And then once you answer that, I would be able to guide you better. If it's because you got a C, well then, and then if you know for sure your school if maybe the C was in biology, would it be more worth taking maybe a biochem course instead? Maybe, but you won't know that, and versus just taking the same undergrad class. You wouldn't know that until you've connected with your program directly. So I say start there. Start with connecting with your program, go to the open houses, come to our virtual conference, ask these questions there. That is going to be the best way for you to find out this information. Of course, if you're a CSBA student, you can use that giant spreadsheet that we have that has ongoing tallies of different schools and courses at their schools. And we had Dr. Richard Wilson who is a CRNA faculty, review that list and give his thoughts on the schools that he was aware of and the courses he was aware of, and how he kind of graded those courses and whether he thought they were good or bad, or, okay, whatever. He gave them a score, good, bad, and average kind of thing. And we've also received a lot of feedback from students who have taken certain courses at colleges who are like, stay away kind of thing, or this is a really great course, take it. So again, we have that spreadsheet. It's on the resource page. You can go find it if you're a CRNA School Prep Academy member. But the rest of that question, hopefully that helps give you some direction, which is really just starting out by going to open houses and talking directly to your program faculty before you sign up for any undergrad classes. Because again, graduate sciences are always going to give you more bang for your buck than any kind of undergraduate level course. They're just not going to be impressed with that. They're going to be more impressed with you getting an A in an advanced level science course. So on to the next one, which is, I gotta move my double screen up some so I can read it. How many CRNA schools should I apply to? The more, the better. How many did you apply to? So this number is going to be different for everyone. And again, this is no one size fits all type of question. I think when you're deciding on what number of schools to apply to, and I do have a number in mind, which I will get to, and why. I think you need to decide again, like like if you're picking to apply to 10 schools, why? Is it because you feel like you need to cast that wide net because you have a lower GPA? Or is it because you're fearful of, I mean, to me, the more schools you apply to, it's usually because you're afraid of not getting in. And so you're just going to like kind of throw a bunch of spaghetti out there and see what sticks. And I'm not saying that's a wrong technique. And I do actually encourage it for those who do have a lower GPA, who are going to probably face more rejection than acceptances in the big picture. But that being said, if you're applying to a lot of schools, like 6+ schools, this is my advice for you. That is a lot of work, and that's okay. But I want you to make sure, I want to make sure that you know going into that many applications what you're up against, because every individual application has to be unique to that program, which means you cannot write one personal statement and submit it to all. You typically can't even submit the same references. You have to ask for individual references. So that's a lot of references if you're applying to 6 schools, to ask, especially because schools require 3 references each sometimes. And you'll have to be asking over and over and over again. So you might have to have more than just 3 people that you're asking so you don't like fatigue them out, right? And you also have to make sure that if they are just writing a blanket reference for you, that they're at least tailoring it to the individual school that you're asking them to write it for, making sure they're not putting like the wrong school name on there or something like that. Yikes. That kind of thing. So it's a lot of work, and I think it's okay to do that. But if you don't need to do that, I don't think you should have to do that. And the number I had in my mind was 3. And the reason why I think 3 is a good goal to have is because it does give you more chances and more opportunities, not only for the exposure to the interview process, the application process, but again, it just increases your odds. And so if you are an applicant who I would say is going into CRNA school with greater than a 3.0 overall, greater than a 3.2 science GPA, and have, leadership skills, good ICU experience, different committee involvement, and, have job shadowed and done all those things, and kind of have a well-rounded application, I think 3 schools is a good number to have. Now, again, if you have less than a 3.2 science GPA and maybe your GPA is closer to that 3.0 mark, I do think applying to more than 3 schools is going to be in your favor, because again, you will be casting that net wider, but just make sure you're not throwing random spaghetti at the wall. Make sure that you are taking the time, the individual time that you would probably have if you were only applying to 1 to 3 schools, and make sure that if you're applying to 6, 7, 8, 9 schools, that you're really making sure that you're understanding what the unique nuances are of that individual school and tailoring that admission statement and why you think you'd be a good fit for their program. Like, what's unique about their program that you think that you would like? What is it about their clinical sites that you like? What is it about their school that you like, the faculty, whatever it may be? Make sure you understand what that piece is, and don't just kind of have a one size fits all. And I think a lot of students make that mistake, and they just don't stand out, during the interview process. So, or they, gosh forbid, they make mistakes, right? They mix their schools up, or even put the wrong names on their admission statement or personal statements and things like that. Ooh, yikes. So just make sure you're careful. It is easy to do. It's not hard to do. I mean, trust me, it's really easy to read what you think should be there, and you read one school's name and you have another school's name there because you're getting like fatigued from all the applications you're submitting. So just if you're planning on applying to more than three schools, I recommend that you just give yourself a very long window to do so, to make sure you're giving yourself a very, very long window. Do not wait till 3-4 months before the applications are all due to submit 6 applications. You will just want to rip out your hair probably. Or I don't know, hopefully you won't lose hair, but yeah, just don't do that to yourself. Give yourself at least, I would say 7 to 9, 10 plus months to spend a month on each application, I would say, at minimum. And that means multiple reviews, multiple like note taking, going to open houses. Like if you're applying to 6 schools, make sure you're taking 6 months at minimum to spend each month one of those months within that 6 month period, researching that individual school, making sure that you are tailoring your application to that program. So that's my recommendation there. Hopefully that helps. But again, I think you just have to know what you're up against. If you only have one school that you're like, this is my only shot because this is where I live, I have obligations, I literally physically will not move, then you have one school, and you have to understand that school in and out and where you fall in the competitive nature for that program. All programs will be different as far as how competitive they are. I would say the average acceptance rate across the board, I actually just got a study. It ended in 2020. So it'd be interesting to see what they do the next 3 years study on from the COA. Back then, between 2018, 19, and 20, the average competitive percent of acceptances was right around 15.5%. As far as the number of applications they get and number of acceptances across the board is 15.5%. I do know it's gone down because, again, since 2020, it's skyrocketed applications. And even from the study from the COA, you can see in 2020 from 2019 that applications like went up by like over like thousands and thousands, but seats didn't go up in the program. So the competitive nature skyrocketed in 2020, and it's just continued to do so. So that being said, know what you're up against if you only have one shot. But, I hear this all the time, which I think is really unfortunate. Like I'll meet people out at a conference and they'll be doing something else. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I tried for CRNA school. I gave myself one shot and I figured if it didn't work, it didn't work. And I can't help it. And maybe if you don't have to agree, and I'm totally okay if you don't agree with me, but I can't help in my mind think, well, then you didn't really want it. Like I immediately comes to my mind. And because a part of me just feels like, if that's the way you go into applying to CRNA school, that's kind of toxic and that's not going to get you in. That means you're willing to give up. That means you're okay with no. That means you just accept defeat. For me, like if I really want something, I'll be damned if you tell me no. I will kill myself to get what I want, like physically do whatever it takes to get that yes. And I kind of think that's how you have to want this so bad, because if you're willing to just give up on your first rejection, you will probably be part of the statistics that are not going to get in. And that's just the harsh reality, given how competitive this is, you guys. Good candidates get rejected every year. And again, that's also heartbreaking. Some part of me is like, you could have gotten in had you just maybe tweaked things. But if they didn't want it bad enough, why would they tweak things? And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like, if you're willing to just give it a shot and to see how it goes, and if it doesn't work out, then you're good. To me, your heart was never in it. And that's kind of how I truly feel. And again, if that offends you, I'm sorry, but that's how I feel. So just speaking my opinion. All right, so let's move on to the next question. What do you think about CAAs and how different are they from CRNAs? I have an entire episode on this. I don't remember the episode number. I do apologize about that. Because again, I didn't pre-look these questions up. Shame on me. But that being said, I think it's just keep scrolling. But I think it was like, what's the difference between a CRNA, MDA, and AA? I think it's what the episode's called. You can find it on the podcast or on the YouTube channel. So I go into more detail there. So I would recommend, because that's an entire episode. Like I can't go into that entire episode now. But you guys, I guess what I want to preference before I even answer this question is, if you're a nurse and you're considering AA, my question would be why? Like there's usually a why, and I'm always interested to know what that why is. And when I have found out this why, when I have asked, it's usually because they're afraid of getting rejected for CRNA and they think AA is an easier route. Whether I'm going to get daggers thrown at me for that, ooh, I'm just speaking what I have heard from when I've asked opinions from people who have told me this statement. And what I can say is that I just don't think that that's a good way of thinking. I think when you are a nurse, you should own the fact that you are a nurse. You should be proud that you are a nurse. You should pursue CRNA. That is an anesthesia provider that can be independent. You have a lot more job opportunities. I don't remember what the current number is. I know at one point it was only 14 states. Maybe it's up to 17 states now. But the numbers are real as far as you can only work in like 17 states as an AA. As far as job duties go, for the most part, like depending on where you work, again, it just depends on the practice. They are very limited on where they can work. They have to work under the supervision of an anesthesiologist physician. So again, they're limited on where they work. They can't just work at an outpatient surgery center because again, they're not going to have the supervision they need to actually do it. And so they're usually stuck at centers that have this, what they call ACT model, where it's a direct supervision model. Again, you can Google all this stuff, or you can listen to the other episode. I kind of went over that, the different types of practice models. And all this means is, how are you reimbursed from the government? Like that's essentially what this comes down to, is how do we get paid for our services? That's all supervision is about, is how do we reimburse? So whether you're working at a facility that's independent practice, right, as a CRNA, again, you don't need a physician to get reimbursed. You practice under your own independent license, that kind of thing. Similar, nurse practitioners do it too. So it's not anything new. But again, I think this just gets so confusing. And I think people are like, well, what the heck? But again, there's different practices like ACT supervision and again, independent practice, and they're all different on as far as staffing ratios between whether, you need a physician to cover you and who that physician needs to be, things of that nature. So again, it gets kind of complicated. But again, if you work at a facility as a CRNA and you work with AAs, for the most part, you would probably be doing very similar cases. Now, some facilities only let the AAs do certain types of cases, like they don't do OB or PEDS, but that's not all facilities. It's facility dependent, whether they actually limit the scope of practice. So it just depends. So I can't really give you a yes or no concrete black and white answer for that. I have personally never even worked with an AA, so I can't even speak to that because I have never ever worked directly with an AA. When I was in training, where I wasn't trained, they had like 1 or 2 AAs. I know they have more now, but this was back in 2013. It was a long time ago. They had just gotten some of like their first AAs. I don't remember a whole lot other than I didn't even know they were an AA until I looked at their badge and I'm like, oh, what is that? Kind of thing. So that being said, as far as like you saying you don't want to become a CRNA and do an AA instead because you think it's easier, I would question first why you think that. And I also think that I would question, like, have you even assessed what your problems are as far as why are you getting rejected from CRNA school? And I don't necessarily think that's the answer to become an AA instead. I really don't. So you're really limiting your future potential career. And that's kind of like, I mean, once you do that, you're kind of set in stone. So I'd be very careful with that. I think that's all I have to say. Can I plead the fifth on the rest of this question? But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about it. And again, I go into a lot more detail on the episode where I compare them. I compare the education, everything. So again, if you want those type of nitty gritty details, you can go listen to the previous episode on that. But again, if you're a nurse, you need to rock being a nurse, in my opinion. Be proud to be a nurse. We are awesome. We are amazing. I personally, again, personal opinion, nurses have a special power. I personally believe, and that special power is we have that connection from the bedside. We have a bedside manner. We have that care and compassion, that empathy that makes us a very unique and good anesthesia provider. You can't get that as an AA. If you come from outside of nursing and become an AA, you've never worked bedside, you've never worked clinical, and now all of a sudden you're providing anesthesia, you're going to miss that key sense that nurses develop as they get their ICU experience and get that bedside experience. And you can't replace that. You'll be missing, you'll have like part of your heart's not there. It's just like, versus like an actual, you're doing the motions, right? I just think nurses tend to have more compassion for their patients because they have that experience at the bedside. And I know I'd probably get daggers thrown at me for that, but I'm just going to say it. That's what I think is the special sauce is of a nurse, is the fact that we have that bedside manner. We have that compassion. We have that empathy. We go into nursing because we want to help people, not because we want to be a mad scientist, although that's part of it too. We like science, right? But typically, if you ask a nurse why they become a nurse, it's because they have compassion, because they care. And that's a unique breed about CRNA, is we can be anesthesia providers, but we care. And if you look at, I encourage you to read this book. It's called Watchful Care. You can buy it from the AANA's bookstore. It's like 30 some dollars from their bookstore. Don't go on Amazon. You'll like be robbed blind. Go on the AANA.com. They have a bookstore and you can buy the book Watchful Care. In fact, there's a new copy coming out. I don't know when, but it's coming out soon, which I'm excited about. But it tells you the history of nurse anesthesia and how it all started. And it makes you feel incredibly proud because nurses, we own that. And we pave the way for this career path. And if it wasn't for nurses, I mean, that was technically kind of like free labor because we cared about the patient. We wanted better outcomes. That was all it was about, not about how much money we can make. What about the patient? I don't want them to die through the surgery. I don't want them to bite a bite block or drip all this ether on their face and suffocate and vomit and not even know it because we're watching surgery instead. No, nurses were like, I care about this patient on the table. They're a human being. They're someone's mother, father, brother, sister. I'm going to make sure they're okay. You do your surgery. I got them. And that's kind of how anesthesia all started because nurses cared about the patient. So that's enough of that riff, but that's what I'm going to leave at that. All right, on to the next question. Oh gosh, it's blocked by ask a question. This was a screenshot from TikTok. So that kind of sums up this episode. Again, if you enjoyed this, let me know. If you haven't left a review for the show, I really appreciate those reviews. And if you follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, leave some more questions. I'll be doing more of these episodes. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you all take care, and we'll see you next week. All right, bye-bye for now. Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.